We are in the midst of championship weekend in fantasy football, but unfortunately, not everybody is in the championship for their leagues. Most teams aren't in the championship. That's how it works. Only two make it. So for a lot of you fantasy owners out there, you're already looking ahead towards next season. And today I've got one buy low at each position that you should look into trading for, whether it's this week in the midst of championship weekend if you don't have a trade deadline, or maybe it's next week once the championship concludes itself. But either way, I've got one buy low at each position that you should definitely look into, and I'm going to start things off with quarterback. Here at quarterback, my buy low is going to be rookie Trey Lance of the San Francisco 49ers. Now, with Trey Lance, I'll just give it to you out of the chute. The reason he's a buy low is because 99% of fantasy owners, 95, I'll go more on that spectrum. 95% of fantasy owners will start to devalue players when they're just not playing. Even if you expect them not to play. For some reason, their value just goes down. And as we know with Trey Lance, he's hardly played this year. Had the one start against Arizona, has come in some games here and there, might actually get a start against Houston this week, which could bring up his value if he plays well. But again, for the most part, he's just sat on the bench, which is completely fine with me. Because from a long-term perspective, that's the right thing for Lance. I was a big fan of him in the draft, but I said, man, this dude's raw. He's going to need a year to sit on the bench, learn, develop before he starts. Year two, we'll start to have that discussion about Trey Lance actually starting football games on a consistent basis. But I want to point to Jalen Hurts. Jalen Hurts this season is QB6 on the year. You want to hear his passing stats? He's passed for under 3,000 passing yards, 16 touchdowns, and 9 interceptions. Those are mediocre, pedestrian passing stats, and yet again, he is QB6 on the year with a missed game. In terms of average fantasy points, he's putting up over 22 fantasy points this year, which would put him in the top 5 of average points amongst quarterbacks. And that's with those pedestrian passing stats. He's still been an elite quarterback because of the rushing value. He's rushed for 10 touchdowns and over 700 yards. That is what's made Jalen Hurts an elite quarterback. Trey Lance has the potential to put up stats better than that. Now, the rushing stats will probably be similar because 10 touchdowns and over 700 rushing yards for a quarterback in 14 games is very impressive. But the passing stats is really where Trey Lance could separate himself from a Jalen Hurts. A Jalen Hurts who is QB6 on the year, an elite fantasy quarterback. Because Lance could easily eclipse over 210 passing yards per game. He has more potential as a passer than Jalen Hurts. He has better receivers than Jalen Hurts does. And he has better play calling, better head coach than Jalen Hurts does. So look at that. This Trey Lance here could put up similar rushing stats and better passing stats than an elite fantasy quarterback, a QB6 in Jalen Hurts. So that's what makes Trey Lance a buy low. He's not playing right now. People are devaluing him. And he could put up, I'm really looking at a Jalen Hurts and a lot of these rushing quarterbacks. If you bring that type of rushing value as a starting quarterback, you're going to put up fantasy points and you're going to be a starting, even you could say an elite fantasy quarterback like a Jalen Hurts has been this year. So that's why you should go out and buy low on Trey Lance. My buy low running back is another rookie, and this one is Michael Carter of the New York Jets. Now, I know that a lot of people at the beginning of the season were frustrated with Michael Carter. This dude was not getting the touches he deserved, but eventually towards the middle of the season, he ran away with the starting job, and he absolutely ascended with it. He's starting to get the touches he deserves, and he's capitalizing. Had a couple huge weeks, including one against the Bengals, where he was a top 5 running back in fantasy. That was week 8. So middle of the season, he certainly was not a buy low because Michael Carter was going off. People are hopping right back on the bandwagon. But then he suffers an injury that keeps him out for about a month. And since then, he's only played 2 games. It was week 15 and week 16. In week 15, they traveled down to Miami to take on the Dolphins in his comeback game, and he dropped a dud. Didn't really get a lot of touches. The Jets were behind in that game. The offensive line really wasn't doing him any favors. And it was his first game back from injury. And then last week against the Jaguars, actually had a solid week, put up over 14 PPR points, but he didn't score a touchdown. It's not like he popped off. So between the injuries in these past 2 games, not scoring a ton of fantasy points, not scoring a touchdown, he has remained under the radar, which is what I love to hear. if I'm trying to go acquire Michael Carter, which I certainly am in Dynasty. I'm trying to go get him while he's, again, quieted down a little bit. And with that, with less hype, means the value is going to go down unless the guy's really, really smart, which isn't always the case, as we know in fantasy football. So Michael Carter, the reason I love the long-term outlook is because he's extremely talented. He brings value as both a pass catcher and a rusher. He's going to get volume as both a pass catcher and a rusher. And the offense is going to get a little better next year. Most of the duds this year have either come because he didn't get enough touches, which won't be the case next year. He's going to be their starting running back. Or it's because the offensive line hasn't done him any favors, or the offense just can't get going, which might happen a couple times next year again. But with Zach Wilson then heading into his second year, it's going to be Michael LaFleur's second year as the offensive coordinator. The offensive line really can't get any worse. Things are going to start to click a little more. And that's what I love. For all those reasons, that's why I really do like Michael Carter heading into next season. And with him being under the radar for the past month and a half or so, that makes him a buy low in Dynasty. Now, kicking things over to my buy low wide receiver, I've got former first-round pick, sophomore Jerry Jeudy of the Denver Broncos. Now, we are all touting Jerry Jeudy a buy low after his rookie season. Film looked awesome, still an amazing route runner. Speed is absolutely still there. Just struggled with some drops, but half those drops came in one game to the Chargers, and we all believed he could clean that up. The film looked awesome. We just blamed his lack of fantasy production on Drew Lock, incompetent quarterback play. Now we're sitting here at the end of 2021, and he's still a buy low. Jerry Jeudy missed in basically the entire first half of the season with an injury. And ever since he's come back, film still looks good. Targets are there. He's leading the team in targets. He's their wide receiver one. But the fantasy production isn't quite following. Now, with Jeudy, I think the worst scenario for him, relatively speaking, is that no change occurs in Denver's offense. Vic Fangio is still the head coach, and Teddy Bridgewater is still the quarterback. Teddy Bridgewater is definitely an upgrade for Jerry Jeudy opposed to Drew Lock. At least I believe so. But Teddy Bridgewater still isn't, though, a guy. He's not an elite quarterback. He's just fine. He doesn't really fit what Denver wants to do either. I know this year Denver seemed to be the team that was like, okay, lean on the run game, lean on the defense, take care of the football, and that's what they were. But when they hired Pat Shurmur, it was the offseason after Drew Lock started 5 games. It was one of the biggest check down kings I've ever seen. He's just consistently checking the ball downfield. But they hired Pat Shurmur, and the first thing they said was, we want a more high-powered offense. We want to push the ball more downfield because look at our division. We got Patrick Mahomes, Justin Herbert, these high-powered offenses. That's where the league is heading, so we want to make that adjustment. And with Teddy Bridgewater, they've tried to, and he's pushing the ball a little more downfield, but Teddy Bridgewater isn't a guy who's running a high-powered offense. With that being said, if those guys stay, Vic Fangio and Teddy Bridgewater, which relatively speaking I believe is the worst scenario, I still believe Jerry Jeudy will improve next season. Because he's due for touchdown progression, and eventually those targets and that talent is just going to start leading into more yards and more receptions and so on and so forth. The talent is going to prevail at some point with those targets. But the best scenario, they land an elite quarterback. They're in the market. They're going to be in the quarterback market this offseason. They're going to be in the race, in the discussion for Deshaun Watson, for Aaron Rodgers, for Russell Wilson. Now, I believe Aaron Rodgers will stay in Green Bay, but, there's a chance. The reason you want to buy low on Jerry Jeudy right now, before the offseason starts, one, he's fresh off 2 subpar weeks. Last week, he had 3 catches for 60 yards. The week before that, he put up a donut. 0 receptions. So you're not only fresh off 2 down weeks, but you want to beat people to the punch with Jerry Jeudy. Because over the offseason, there's going to be rumors about Denver landing one of these elite quarterbacks. Hell, over the offseason, they might end up landing one of those elite quarterbacks, like to the point where they actually have that guy on the roster, and we know for a fact that Jerry Jeudy now has an elite quarterback. Because if that's the case, if Jerry Jeudy does land one of those elite quarterbacks, he enters wide receiver 1 conversation. But the thing is, if you wait, and then the rumors come out, if you wait until those rumors come out and they potentially even land one of those guys, owners of Jerry Jeudy are going to hear that and they're going to move the price point up on Jerry Jeudy. So you're going to have to give up a lot more than you would have to right now to go get him. So either way, he's going to improve next year. Whether it's a leap or a leap up into wide receiver 1 status if they do land that elite quarterback and some serious changes are made in Denver. Either way, I think a leap is coming, and you're going to be able to buy low on Jerry Jeudy right now. I'd go out and try to get him right now at this moment in this current window for the reasons I just mentioned. And now to wrap things up with my buy low tight end, I've got Cole Kmet of the Chicago Bears. Now, Kmet is a guy who's grown on me as this season has gone on. I wasn't really too sure what to make of him in the preseason. My expectations weren't too high. But again, as I said, he's growing on me as this year goes on. The targets have been fairly consistent. He's been a consistent contributor in this offense. He's lately playing at least 90% of the snaps over the past 2 weeks. And for most of the season has played at least 75% of the offensive snaps. He is, in a crowded tight end room, become the main receiving option out of all the tight ends. And it will stay that way moving forward because he is the youngest and he has the most potential out of all of them, the most room to grow. And to think that he's already the main receiving threat. On the season, he's got 53 receptions for 539 receiving yards. That's not too bad. It isn't. I know it's not the flashiest thing, but what's really holding Cole Kmet back is he hasn't found the end zone. Cole Kmet has 0 touchdowns on the season. Now, you could also link that with the fact that the Bears have only thrown 14 touchdowns this season, which is tied for 3rd least in the NFL. And that's a number that is bound to go up as Justin Fields continues to develop and this offense continues to add some talent. And Justin Fields continues to get more chemistry with guys like Cole Kmet. You have to remember, Justin Fields did not run with the 1 till the middle of the season. Andy Dalton was the starter heading into the year. So when we factor all those things in, along with the fact that Matt Nagy, there's a chance he gets fired, which would only improve the offensive play calling, I really do like Cole Kmet because this is a dude who, lately, 11 targets against the Lions on Thanksgiving. He had 7 targets the next week, 5, 9, 5 last week against the Seattle Seahawks. And even in the weeks before that, had 8 targets, 6, only had a couple games where he's targeted 3 or less times. Most of the time, he's getting 5, 6, 7 targets. And I know part of that is the fact that they don't have a lot of receivers. And the Bears are bound to maybe add one. Maybe they sign a Michael Gallup. They draft somebody high up in the draft. Could take some targets away from Cole Kmet. But I honestly think this is going to be a fairly consistent theme over his career with the Chicago Bears. Because he's got a lot of potential. He's suffered with some drops this year. He's only going to improve. And I think the fact of the matter is, Cole Kmet is just going to be a piece of this offense as a receiving threat. And as long as he continues to develop, continues to gain chemistry with Justin Fields, this offense continues to, evolve, he'll start to find the end zone more as well, and that's going to lead to some production. So I would not be banking on Cole Kmet to be your tight end 1 of the future in your Dynasty leagues. But he's certainly a buy low right now that has the upside to be a top 10 tight end in fantasy football one day. Again, I wouldn't bank on it, but the upside is there, and I think you could easily flip a 2nd round pick, a 3rd round pick for Cole, probably a 2nd round pick for Cole Kmet right now, and he could return a lot of value for you. So that's just something to keep in mind. But that's how I want to end off today's video. I know Cole Kmet's probably the least valuable of those guys, but do not sleep on him. I do really like Cole Kmet at his current value point right now. But that's going to wrap up today's video. Make sure you guys go subscribe to the TWSN Patreon page. We are making so many people money over there. It's not even funny. If you want to make some money sports betting, go subscribe to the TWSN Patreon page. It's easy dough. It's easy bread. And also, go follow our Twitter and Instagram accounts. I have the links to those in the description. But other than that, I don't have anything else to say. So I'll see you guys next time.